Hi, I'm Shar. I was just on an ace fiction panel and we didn't have time to answer all of the questions. So I'm doing a short series where I go through some of those unanswered questions. So this pair of questions are about kind of expressing your own ace experience and being worried about the consequences of that. So the first one is, my protagonist started to turn out to be an ace with trauma background, and I feel guilty for perpetuating that idea, but now I feel like maybe since that's my background, it might be okay. Is it? So yeah, these are thoughts that I've had, worrying that my own experience perpetuates stereotypes. And unfortunately, there's just enough stereotypes between traumatized, robot, childish, sociopath, that it can be a little hard to have a genuine character and not touch on any of that. And according to one statistic I read from an ACE census, it was, I believe, 34.5% said that they had experienced sexual trauma. So it is a real and common shared ACE experience. And I think it's important to be able to express yourself, especially when that would be so meaningful to a third of the ACE community. But I understand the concern. So this is advice for some things that I'm going to try to do in my own writing, is that introduce asexuality as normal early on, and then later introduce the aspect of the character that is often a negative stereotype. And another way to handle it is to be sure that you have the space for the character to delve into this and delve into the nuance of it. You can even have your character question, how do I know for sure that the trauma didn't cause the asexuality? As long as you have the space to include that, for a lot of ACEs, they haven't been traumatized, or they knew they were ACE and then they were traumatized, that it's, sexuality doesn't have a cause. Let's just get a big banner out there and say sexuality is not caused by things, it just is. All right, other advice is what the character does about these personality traits, that the character doesn't need to do anything about their asexuality, that the character and other characters around them do not treat this like it's a problem, whereas needing support processing a trauma background, that can need therapy and support and time to process it. It's seen as a burden to work through, whereas asexuality isn't a burden. So yeah, taking the time with how you frame it, how you pace it, how you give the space for nuance. So I would recommend that you go for it and try, because that's a really important story. But I very much understand your concern about perpetuating negative stereotypes. But I think the more ACE representation we get out there, the more we can kind of bury the negative stereotypes, thin out the negative stereotypes, so that it won't be your responsibility solely to make sure no one is confused and accidentally conflates the trauma history with the asexuality. So one day you won't have so much burden. Okay, the second question is, as an author, I sometimes experience gatekeeping or disappointment from the asexual community because my stories and characters represent my sexual identity, not the whole spectrum. Is there too much expectation for readers? Yes and no. So on the one hand, as an author, it's important for you to know that there are ace readers out there who, if the character wants to have sex, if they experience things that could be mistaken for sexual attraction, because, I mean, that's a pretty blurry term already, like, libido, or, the body becoming aroused, even though that's not the mind experiencing sexual attraction, that you will have some people in the ace community give bad reviews because they don't feel it's ace. And there are also readers out there who are frustrated that the spectrum is erased in certain spaces, and feel frustrated when there's an ace story that, through not mentioning any other ace experience, can kind of make it seem like there's one ace experience. And unfortunately, that puts a lot of burden on the author. As I was saying with the previous question, ideally we'll come to a space where there's enough ace rep out there that it will be not on less of a burden on the author to explain everything, that your average reader will happen across multiple ace stories and will see that there's a variety of ways to be ace. But we're not there yet. So I do think it is important for authors to be aware of those two types of readers, and there's other readers as well. Be aware of the concerns of those readers, but also be aware that you can't make everyone happy. And that, self-expression versus education, it can be hard to fit all of that into one story. There's no perfect answer to this, just that it's difficult when people have different perceptions of what asexuality is, and that those conflict. And now you're an author trying to express yourself, and you're at the crossroads of this conflict. So, if you can make readers, or your ace readers, feel seen, that can be good. Most ace books I read, they don't go out of their way to highlight there's other kinds of asexual identities. But I totally get your concern, because personally, I felt a lot of anxiety when I started trying to write more ace stories, because I didn't want people in the reviews saying this isn't ace. That would really shatter my little ace identity, my little baby ace identity. But the more ace reviews I read of other people's works, the more I feel like you cannot escape that. There are always going to be people who either feel like there is no spectrum and you should not have told a story from the spectrum, or there will be people on the spectrum who feel you ignored them by expressing yourself. There are some things you can try to do to acknowledge the spectrum, like having a second or third ace character with a slightly different ace spectrum identity, or sex indifferent, sex favorable, sex repulsed characteristic. But I understand there might not be room in your story for that. You could try to work in conversation. That might feel clunky. Okay, those were my very long and convoluted answers. So, long story short, you do you, express yourself. I know it feels like there's this big kind of educational burden on you, and this burden to do the representation correctly, and it's absolutely good to be concerned about that, and to, you know, get sensitivity readers, consider people with different perspectives, consider how you can make it really clear to avoid stereotypes. But at the end of the day, expressing yourself is important. So you do you. Okay, bye.